Stand by. Transmitting sound. Download complete. Now launching audio stream. It's the Kelly Alexander Show.
Hello and welcome to the show. We are completely jam-packed this week. We're also chatting with our relationship coach, Frank B. Kermit, about your emotional needs that should be met by your mate. Let's go.
Capture your need for sound.
Kelly at kellyalexandershow.com.
It's the Kelly Alexander Show.
Love and relationships involve a lot of effort and understanding. And you know what? To help us along this path is relationship coach Frank B. Kermit. Frank, welcome back to the Kelly Alexander Show. You were so awesome the last time. We just had to have you come back on.
Kelly, the pleasure was all mine and is all mine yet again.
Fantastic. Now, Frank, the last time you were on the show, we discussed, love and relationships right from the very beginning, going out on that very, all-important first date. Now we're kind of moving on to one of the next steps, I guess, in our journey through love, how to deal with some of the emotional needs in a budding relationship. Particularly right now, we're gonna focus a bit on the men's side. We'll also bring in some emotional needs of women. I guess, Frank, though, what are some of the key things that a woman should be aware of when it comes to her man's emotional needs as they embark on this, new relationship?
What she needs to be aware of is that a man's desire to commit to her is going to be based directly on her ability to address his emotional needs. It's not necessarily what she looks like, how good she can cook, how much money she makes in her own career. It's about his particular emotional needs, how well he can address them. Now, we're assuming that he's an emotionally healthy male. If he's not an emotionally healthy male, even if she's doing everything right, he still won't make that commitment to her. But if he is an emotionally healthy male, all she has to do is address his particular priority of emotional needs, and he will feel the desire to commit to her.
And how does she figure that out, Frank?
Well, I've already devised a number of categories that she can be aware of ahead of time. It's going to be based on how she's going to act towards him and seeing whether or not he gives attention back to her. So here's an example. One of the things that I teach is that a man has an emotional need of quiet time. That's his time to basically step away from the world, recharge, relax, regenerate. He has to be alone with his thoughts so he can process the day, the emotion, whatever. If she's very encouraging of that quiet time, she gives him his space. That's a way of addressing his emotional need. Different men will need this addressed differently. Some guys need to go away into the woods, do manly things, chop wood, that sort of thing. Other men really just want to ride their motorcycles, go for a drive. Some men just want to go out to the local pub and have a beer. Whatever his thing is, whether he's in the tool shed, wants to spend extra time in the bathroom in a nice big bathtub, or whether it's just going out for a walk alone. Whatever his thing is, give him that space. Don't crowd him in. Don't ask to take part. Don't ask to be involved. Let him know, sure, go ahead, have fun, I'll see you when you get back. That's a way of addressing that quiet time. You do that enough, he'll come back to you and give you even more attention when he's had his quiet time.
Wow, Frank, that's really that's like a basic thing to think of, but I think if people don't take the time to think of it, it escapes them, and then they would, for example, try to infringe on his time, and then that would thus drive him away, right? Or further away.
Exactly. Women want to show love by trying to be mothering. Unfortunately, if she succeeds in being mothering to a man, she herself is not going to find him as attractive as when they first met, but she won't even know why. And for a guy, he might mistake her mothering as his need for having a woman be courteous, be kind, be sweet, whatever he defines as femininity. So meanwhile, she's doing all this mothering for him. He's thinking, wow, this is great. She's starting to feel resentful. She doesn't know why she's feeling resentful. She just figures it must be something. It's just not there anymore. The magic is gone. The chemistry is dead. He's oblivious to it because she's still doing those nice mothering things. If he's a very aware male, he'll stop the mothering instincts. He'll halt it and say, stop, you're not my mother. Those are the 3 sexiest words that a man can tell a woman. Stop mothering me.
And Frank, it's interesting because it really is a delicate balance between the two of them knowing what the other person needs and doing that, within your own personal comfort zone, I would imagine.
Exactly. First of all, you touched on a very, very important topic, and that is doing what's within your comfort zone. If you're meeting your partner's needs, but you're doing so by sacrificing your own values, that's not going to work in a long-term relationship. Part of what you're looking for when you're trying to establish a long-term relationship is to find a partner whose needs you can address by doing things within the scope of your own parameters. So I'll give you an example here, okay? Well, let's take a really simple example. Let's say you're not a smoker, and maybe you have asthma, maybe you have a respiratory issue, and you meet somebody and you fall in love, but the person you fall in love with smokes. Now, you want to support that person and say, it's okay, you can go ahead and smoke, but the person maybe is smoking around you or is smoking just outside the house. Well, they're not smoking indoors, they're smoking outside, but there's still cigarette smoke in the area, and it's detrimental to your health. Sacrificing your own parameters, which in this case is being in a smoke-free environment, just to address your partner's emotional needs, giving your partner that escape, that quiet time, is not going to work long-term. You can't make a relationship work by sacrificing your core being or putting yourself at major risk.
So, Frank, I have a question then, because is this sort of process then one where there should be a healthy dose of compromise? Or because again, I guess it's a delicate balance because, what if, she doesn't feel connected to some of his lifestyle choices? For example, him wanting them both to go to garage sales.
Okay, let's look at that specific example. This is part of his lifestyle. He likes going out to garage sales. She's not really a fan. Unless she has a major aversion to it, like going to garage sales is against her religion, or there's some psychological damage where maybe she had an apartment infested with bed bugs and now she refuses to buy anything that's old or used that doesn't come straight from the manufacturer. Unless it's something that's serious, then yeah, there is going to have to be some compromise, because you have to look at each item that you're going to quote unquote compromise on and ask yourself, how important is this to me? Now, if it's something that's really, I don't know, let's say it comes to the topic of having children and, what religion you're going to raise your child in. Well, if you have a certain type of belief and you have a certain type of faith, and it's okay, you want to love somebody of a different faith, and, you can believe what you want, I'll believe what I want. When it comes to how you raise your kids, this is something very serious. And in those aspects, there is no compromise. You either are with it or you're not. So before you go into it thinking I'm going to have to compromise, you got to be pretty clear about what you're willing to compromise. Again, it's just a matter of not going beyond your personal parameters.
And Frank, when though do you have this conversation? Because, again, last time when we spoke, it was the first date and getting to know each other and so on and so forth. And now you're embarking on this relationship. How soon do you have these serious type discussions, like again with again maybe you don't share the same religion, you want to have kids, but you can't even imagine letting them grow up in that other religion, not because you hate it or whatever, but just like that's not what you're about. How does that come up naturally? Is that a time frame that you should be knowing that you need to have that discussion before your heart gets involved deeper than it should be if things need to be called off? That's like such a touchy subject.
I agree, it's a touchy subject, and what I advise actually is a little bit controversial, and here it is. Before you start having those type of conversations with anybody else that you're on a date with, have those conversations with yourself. Know exactly what your boundaries are before you go out on that first date. Now, while you're on that first date, you're going to bring up stories, you're going to ask questions that'll lead you to figuring out where this other person can play a role in your life. So I'll give you an example to this. When I first went out with my ex-fiancée, one of the first questions I asked on a date is, well, how religious are you? And the reason I asked that is because I myself at the time was not a religious person. And I didn't want to, I wanted to be with somebody who was spiritual, but not necessarily religious. And she had said at the time, well, I'm not very religious at all. And I thought, wow, score, this is great, this is wonderful. The questions I should have asked would have been, oh, so what you're saying is that if and when you ever get married, you'll want to get married by a justice of the peace or a judge at City Hall. And now she had turned around and said, well, no, if we would have to get married in, name the place of worship. Then I know that she's a lot more religious than she's leading on to be. These are the types of ways you would bring up those topics. You can say things like, well, I want to bring up my children in such and such a type of environment. If you're looking to get serious right away with somebody, and there are people like that. There are people that don't want to play the field. They don't want to date around. They basically want to find somebody, get married, start their life, start their family. And if that's what they're going after, then they need to be upfront about this stuff, even on the first date. If, however, they're open to casually dating a lot of different people, just figuring out who they are by going out on a number of dates, finding out what they really like, not what they think they want, but what they really like, then you might ask some softer questions that play around the issue to make sure that you get a real feel for the person. Most people will go out on a date and figure, well, if I like the person, then we'll work out this stuff, we'll change. And that's not the reality. You have to figure out what it is you want, what type of lifestyle you want, what type of partner you want, and then when you're on a date, find out if that person can live up to that role for you.
Joining us on the show is relationship coach Frank B. Kermit. You can check him out, www.franktalks.com. Frank, if we bring it back to the man's emotional needs for just a sec, because you've mentioned it a couple of times now in our discussion about commitment. If she isn't meeting, for example, some of his key needs, is this where the man, would exude commitment issues, or is being committed an issue that is sort of deeply ingrained and may have actually been there the whole time? Like, is it two separate issues or one?
I think it's one issue. The idea, in the way I teach it, if a man has the capacity to commit, then address his emotional needs and he will commit to you. One of the things that a man is very capable of, he's very capable of having sex with a woman without any intention of ever committing to her. And women seem to mistake the idea of, well, if he's still sleeping with me regularly, it means that he'll want a commitment at some point, and that's not how men work.
So they really need to be aware of, I guess, your partner's character, I guess?
You need to be aware of what's really important to your partner. So for a man, this might be, I'll give you some very specific emotional needs of men. And this is where it'll be very important for the woman to know how to get his commitment. Emotional need number 5 of man. Can you support his lifestyle? And this includes his social lifestyle, his career, whatever type of life he wants to build for himself. If he has a certain high-level career, or certain high-power status, can you be a woman who can support that lifestyle and all the good and bad things that are involved in that? That could make up to 75% of the reason why a man will even marry a woman. Even if she's not addressing his emotional needs in other areas, if she can support the lifestyle he wants to set up, she's got a very good chance of getting a commitment from him. She might not get his monogamy, but she'll get a commitment of some sort. Another emotional need of men, give him the sex he wants. And when women call me up and say, why did my boyfriend cheat on me? We have a lengthy discussion. Sometimes we get the boyfriend involved in the discussion. Turns out there's something that he's always wanted to do that she's just not into. And initially he felt, well, I can do without it, because I really, really love her. Long term, that's just not the case.
Is that really true, Frank? Like the whole way through, like if there's something that he wants that you're not comfortable with, you're like, for lack of a better word, you're screwed in the grand scheme of things?
Well, when it comes to men, yeah.
Really?
And here's a specific reason for this. The act of sex for men is an emotional need. There's only 2 ways that men get oxytocin released in the brain: long embraces and the act of sex. Now, when you complicate that with his particular, let's call it fetish, for lack of a better term, even if it's straight vanilla sex, if he has a particular thing that he likes during sex that really releases that chemical into his brain, if that's still the only way that men get that type of high. A woman can have oxytocin released in the brain for a number of ways: sex, eating a lot of certain foods, physical contact, even if it's not sexual, but a long, penetrating massage, physically touching her girlfriends in a very platonic but affectionate way. Oxytocin in the brain gets released in women much more than it ever does for men. So if he has a particular sex act that, it's the one thing that totally gets him going, it's the one thing that totally brings him to that euphoric balance of sex, then either if you don't provide it for him or you're not comfortable with helping him get it and satisfying it in a way where the relationship is not threatened, then it's very likely that he's going to get it elsewhere.
Now, Frank, a question for you with regards to that. Is it that the man himself needs to be self-aware that he needs that specific act to happen in the grand scheme of things, so that he knows if that woman is not going to provide it, that he needs to, cut the cord right now? Because I almost feel like the woman, should be aware of his needs and all that sort of stuff, but like she might not know to which degree that act is important to him, because again, he might be saying, like you said originally, he might try to gloss it over, that it's not such a big deal, when in fact it is.
You have brought up an absolutely crucial, beautiful point. Thank you for bringing this up. Let's talk about self-awareness. Most men and women are not self-aware of their own emotional needs, just from the get-go. They spend their times building their careers, building their social lives. They spend their times trying to escape life from filling it up with a lot of distraction, but they don't really take the time to figure out, well, why am I into certain things? What does it satisfy for me? Can I get that same fulfillment doing other things? Both men and women are not self-aware. They go into relationships, and let's look on the bright side here. Men and women don't go into relationships with the intent to hurt the other party. They don't go into a marriage hoping to get divorced. They go into it with the best of intentions, saying, I really want to make this relationship work. But they don't have the skills, and they definitely don't have the self-awareness. So sometimes both a man and a woman might say, well, I can manage without this. I can figure this out, or I'll change my mind, or she'll change, or he'll change. When in fact, human beings don't change in that manner. They only change when they're trying to move away from pain or in the pursuit of pleasure. And when you're in a relationship that you end up feeling, wow, I have to change, but this is a basic need of mine, an emotional need that's not being addressed, and you're still toughing out that relationship, you end up feeling resentment, but you can't always articulate why. Part of what I try to do with my work is to educate both men and women about their emotional needs, to say, okay, you're a man, these are the emotional needs that you would have as a base. Anything beyond that, let's discuss. I'll do the same thing with a woman. These are your base emotional needs. Anything beyond that, let's discuss. Can you interpret all of your actions and all that you do through this filter of my emotional needs system? And most times what people describe as, when they start learning that material, is the elusive obvious. I've always felt that, but I could never articulate why until now. This is what I hear more from men. With women, they look at my emotional needs model for women and say, yep, that makes a lot of sense to me, but I've never seen it that way.
And Frank, a question that sort of came to my mind as we were talking, how do you avoid, an adversarial relationship whereby one party feels like they're being the more giving and connected partner in the relationship and that their own needs are now being overlooked?
First of all, you are responsible for your behaviors, and if you feel that you're being taken advantage of in a relationship, you need to put your foot down and step up. You need to communicate that. One of the biggest mistakes that couples make is they expect the other person to be fully aware of his or her emotional needs. So if I'm dating a woman and I'm doing something and I'm completely oblivious to her being hurt by it, part of why she's angry is the fact that I'm oblivious to it. And having that kind of unrealistic expectation is just going to lead to more problems, even if this relationship ends and she goes off and dates someone else. She's carrying with her that repeating behavior pattern of having an unrealistic expectation that the other person should just know. Our culture right now is facing a crisis that has never happened before. We all have too much choice, and we don't have the social skills to know what to do with it. And any time you get into a relationship and you take on an unrealistic expectation, well, the other person should just know, you are setting yourself up for failure in relationships, because it's not anybody's obligation or responsibility to just know. You have to communicate where you stand and what you need to your partner.
And something, that has also cropped into my mind as you're speaking is, when it comes to emotional needs of men and, what they need, what they don't need, is it truly important that they feel completely sort of necessary in the woman's life in order for her to sort of function? Or do men actually prefer to know that their woman can take care of herself?
Okay, this falls under men's emotional need number 10. It's 1/3 of how he defines femininity, the feeling of being appreciated. This is where some men truly feel that they feel good when they feel needed. When a woman says, "Oh, I couldn't have done this without you. You're so amazing. You're so wonderful," he feels that appreciation. Why is that so important for him? Because that's how he defines femininity, the feminine need for a man. It helps define not only what he finds attractive in a woman, but gives him part of his identity. This is why some guys will be really, really stupid, and they will continue to shower a woman with attention when all she wants is friendship. And he keeps saying, "But I still have a chance with her. I still have a chance with her. Look, I'll buy her a pass every month. That'll show her how much I love her. Look, I'll go wash her car. That'll show her how much I love her." And she's appreciating him for it. And she showers him with appreciation. Why does he stay hooked on that? Because appreciation for a man is part of how he interprets femininity. So he gets that appreciation. Then he becomes what I call an emotional cookie man. He gets attention, but he doesn't get sex, and he does not get affection.
There's a lot going on, Frank, when it comes to the emotional needs of both men and women. And I guess, like, how would you sum up, this particular aspect of relationships? Like, obviously, it's something very, very important.
Okay, I can summarize this in now 2 sentences for you. When it comes to the emotional needs of men are you're either my ally or you're my enemy. Is what you're doing going to make you my ally? Are you on my side? Are you with me? Or is what you're doing going to make you my enemy? You're against me. You're turning on me. That's how men think in terms of their emotion.
So women kind of need to be aware of that, obviously.
Exactly. So let's say a guy and a girl are talking, and he's had a particularly rough period in his life. So he starts sharing some of his, personal problems. He's decided that he's going to share himself and be just a little bit vulnerable. And this is not a guy who's always talking about his problems, but it's the one time where a very strong, maybe a silent type of guy starts to say, this thing happened and it really bothered me, and I really just, and he just needs to be vulnerable in that moment. If the woman he's with just turns around and says, "Oh, I really don't want to hear this now, let's just have some fun," he'll shut down, he'll still have sex with her, he'll never commit to her. Because in that respect, she became his enemy. She punished him for showing a vulnerability.
Wow, that's an excellent point, Frank. That's awesome. And Frank, we're kind of pressed for time right now, but if people want to get in touch with you again, because you have very amazing and wonderful tips, to be self-aware. And I think when it comes down to it, that's just a key thing when it comes to relationships. You need to be self-aware of what you're about, and then that'll help you hopefully be aware of what is going on in the relationship and what's going on with your partner. Where can people reach you, Frank? You can all go to my website, www.franktalks.com. Frank, you're going to join us again, right? I believe. And next time, what are we going to chat about as we continue on this journey through love and relationships? Well, we'll still be answering questions on emotional needs of both men and women, and we can start talking about relationship structures. Everything from setting up a monogamous relationship to setting up a non-monogamous relationship, and what are the rules thereof. Thank you so much, Frank. I really appreciate your time. Kelly, it's always a pleasure to be on your show and talk with you. That's Frank B. Kermit, a relationship coach. And again, for more information, www.franktalks.com. So thanks so much for hanging out. I always appreciate your time. Comments or questions, always appreciated. Kelly at kellyalexandershow.com. Have a great week. You and I'll chat soon.
The Kelly Alexander Show is hosted by Kelly Alexander. Produced by Esteban Vargas, Barbara Purcell, Chris Paré, and Kelly Alexander. Original themes and production music composed by Ian Campbell. Thanks for listening.